Today, we're going to make meat pies for Christmas Eve. Doesn't that look good? And we're going to make the pie crust from scratch. So the first thing we need is the ingredients: flour, salt, a little bit of water, some lard and or butter, depending on what you want for this. We have lard. Now my daughter's going to make this out of the goodness of her heart. So the first thing is your lard. It's about ½ pound. You're going to chop it up small, and you're going to make sure it's cold. That's rule number one. So in a bowl, we're going to put 2 2/3 cup of flour and a teaspoon of salt, and the lard that we just cut up, and we're going to mush it around. So there's two different ways. My daughter wanted to show if you don't have a pastry blender like she's got there, you can use forks. And you want to mush it around until it's nice and small. Then you're going to take a cup of cold water and slowly blend it in to the flour. Of course, I sped it up because it's kind of boring if you're not doing it yourself. And you don't want it a real runny consistency. I mean, you want the dough to be still flaky because when you mush it all together, it's going to come out floury. You can see from the bowl how chunky it still is. It doesn't look super moist, but when we're going to let it sit, and it will. So you want to mush it all together into a nice ball, but don't over mush it, because the more you mush it, the more you kind of work the gluten out. So you want just enough to hold it together. Now Abby's cut it into 2 pieces because for the pie we need a top and a bottom in order to make it easier for rolling out and that. Now we wrap it in plastic wrap. It doesn't have to be super tight. And into the fridge for an hour to let it sit. You want to let it sit longer, go ahead. Now for the actual meat pie, this is my mom's recipe. We need 2 to 3 medium potatoes, chopped up nice, and that's going to go into a pot to boil. You want to really cook them so they're nice and soft when you're done. 20 minutes to a ½ an hour. Throw a little salt in the water and let them go. Now into the pan goes your hamburger mix. Traditionally it's hamburger and pork, and that's what this is. They actually had it at the store, beef and pork mix. So that's what I bought, and that's what I'm working with. Now it's going to take about £1.5 pounds or so for each pie that you're going to do. And when you're done, obviously it's going to look something like this. And we add some pepper to taste, of course. You want to put more in, put more in. A little bit of salt. And into that goes a cup of diced onions that I had done ahead of time. If you want to pre-cook them a little bit, you can do that. Me mom just said to throw them in like that and cook them in with the meat. So that's what I do. Now here's our potatoes. ½ an hour later, nice and cooked. And now we're going to mush them down. Just mash them so they're nice and, well, they don't have to be super smooth, but smooth enough. If you want to add a little butter at this point or a little bit of milk, you can do that. I wouldn't advise it because the potato is mostly a binding agent with the meat. That's up to you. A little bit of butter is not going to hurt. So into the mixture it goes. And this is how simple it is. That's my mom's basic recipe. And now we're going to combine the mashed potatoes in with the meat. Be ever so careful so it doesn't splash all over my stove. And you want to make sure all the hamburger gets incorporated. That's kind of important because it also helps the hamburger to stick together. So back to our crust. My daughter's taking the dough out of the fridge. You want to flour your surface, flour your rolling pin. What we're going to do is we're going to roll out our dough so that we have a crust to work with. Now it depends on the size of your pie dish. Is the larger size, which is okay. You work with what you got. That way you just get more meat pie. If you got a smaller one, you just have to adjust your recipe for whatever it is that you're actually using. And once it's rolled out, we slide the pie dish into place and ever so carefully kind of throw it into the pie dish. And of course, now we're going to have to trim all that dough on the top. Not a biggie. You just grab a knife and carefully go around the outside edges until you get it to where you want it. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're not a cookbook or something super fancy. This is just for the fam. It can be rough around the edges. Kind of looks cool that way. It looks much more homemade. And we're going to bake this for 5 minutes or so, just to kind of give it a head start on baking. If you don't, what tends to happen is the pie doesn't quite cook, or the crust doesn't quite cook underneath. So to it, we're going to add our meat mixture, once it's out of the oven, of course. That looks good. Pat it down a little bit, that helps. And the other pie crust that we rolled out is going on top. And of course you're going to have extra. I've kind of balled it up and put it in the freezer for the next time I make a pie, and that way I've got the crust. I don't have to get my daughter to do it. And you want to crimp the edges, just like that. And that holds the top to the bottom, which is kind of important. Once again, it doesn't have to be fancy or anything, but you want it to look halfway decent. And then one of the most important things is you need vents. I always thought this was cool as a kid. You know, it looked kind of fancy. I really thought that's all it was. And you can do them however you want. You want to make arrows, make arrows. You want to make slots, whatever you want. Now, the last part to make it nice and golden brown is, of course, top it with an egg wash. You just need one egg, mix it around. Grab a paintbrush or a pastry brush or whatever you got and just kind of spread it around. And that way when it comes out of the oven, it'll look fancy. And watch it because it is heavy. It will be. So you want to bake it half an hour, 375, and look at what happens when it comes out. There you go. That's my Christmas meat pie. Enjoy. Thanks for the recipe, Mom. I hope you enjoyed this recipe, and thanks for watching. As always, if you try this, leave me a comment below and let me know how it works out. Give me a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, of course, subscribe. But thanks for stopping by, and I hope you learned something. And until next time, bye for now.